if you put in place an anti-bribery system and you do the training and you do the communication and you have the procedures and the policies and everything that you need to get your standard accredited, your organization accredited, when something goes wrong or when you suspect that there has been a violation, that's really when you will know if the management is serious in this business or if it's not. If it does a proper investigation, if it takes proper step to resolve the issue, then you know that it's not just for the peanut gallery, it's not just for marketing purposes, it's not just for publicity, that it is a real issue for them, and they're taking their responsibility regarding that. So it's important for the credibility of the management system within the organization because, as my associate mentioned this morning when we did this presentation in French, I mean, if you have an organization, you're the boss, you have 24 hours in a day to keep an eye on whatever all your employees and managers and supervisors is doing. On the other hand, all of them have also 24 hours to watch what you're doing. So you're outnumbered, right? So you might as well move in the sense that where you said you would be moving because you're going to be criticized if you don't, and you're going to lose credibility, and your management system is going to lose credibility. What my topic this afternoon will be based on two things. First of all, the requirements of the standard, which I will go pretty quickly over so that you understand where I'm coming from, but mainly from our experience in doing investigation, internal investigation in organizations. There's a lot of issues that may come up that are not necessarily under the standard, that are not covered by the standard. What do we do then? How can you carry out an investigation to make sure that the investigation will reach its objectives, but with a minimum of impact and negative impact on the organization's morale and functioning in operational functions. So this is really what I'm going to do. What does the standard say? 8.10, what it says is that an organization shall implement procedures, require assessment, and where appropriate, investigation of any bribery. I'll stop right there. Two terms, assessment and investigation. There needs to be an assessment of the information, the elements that were discovered during an audit, an internal audit on your controls. You've noticed some, maybe not very clear violation, but certainly red flags that are coming out. You need to assess that in order to decide which the best course of action. Because although Clause 8.10 addresses specifically investigation, there are other tools in the standard. You can do an internal audit. You can do a management review, which may have the same results as a full-blown investigation in terms of correcting what's going wrong in the organization. Is it because procedures are not clear enough? Is it because the training was not up to par? What are the reasons behind the fact that we're having violation to a procedure? So there may be some reasons for that, which are not necessarily always because someone is intentionally wants to violate your procedure. So assessment is very important. Investigation of any bribery or violation of anti-bribery policy and the anti-bribery management system, which is reported, detected, either detected through your proper means, your controls, your internal controls that you must carry out on a regular basis, or reasonably suspected, and that can come from many sources. It may come from outside sources, it may come from a confidential line that you have within the organization, or that you have someone, you outsource the confidential line. They will report back to the conformity function about a suspected issue. So this needs to be investigated, but certainly assessed first. Require appropriate action in the event of that the investigation reveals any bribery. That's following the investigation. Okay? You need to make proper decision. Again, a management function, not an investigating function. The investigation is to get the facts, and as we often say, just the facts, ma'am. We want the facts. And then we'll see afterwards what's the best course of action. This is a management issue. And I'll come back to that a little later when I speak about the report that we should provide to the client. Empower, enable investigators. When it's inside investigators, internal investigators, it's usually easier because they come from the conformity department or the accounting department or wherever. Even if it's a major corporation, international corporation, they probably have their own investigators, and they already have all the powers given to them to investigate. The problem is different when you require investigators from a third party, so coming like we do when we go in to an organization to do an investigation at their request. Then it is very important in our discussion with them to make sure that we have the sound basis to run the investigation, and we have the power to do so, that we have the authority to carry out that investigation properly. Require cooperation in the investigation by relevant personnel. Obviously, this is you may require it, doesn't mean you're going to get it. We ask that if it's possible, if it's not confidential, if it's not highly confidential, in some cases, we even recommend that the top management send a letter or a message to the department that may be under investigation regarding the fact that they've had some information and they've asked investigators to cover that aspect, and they would wish to have the cooperation of the employees. That can happen, but more often than not, it's a highly confidential investigation. And in many cases, it covers high management. So obviously, it's not so easy to get that part. Require that the status and results of the investigation are reported to the anti-bribery compliance function. That's basic. Depending, again, on the type of violation. If we're talking about a major violation, 9 times out of 10, it's going to go right up to the top, even above the compliance function. Why? Because probably the investigation will have been ordered by higher up. They will want to have an update on the investigation and a report. But in minor instances, often the case is that the information will be, the report will be given to the compliance function. Require that the investigation is carried out confidentially and that the outputs of the investigation are confidential. Again, confidential from our part, yes, but from the part of the organization, how they deal with that during the investigation and after the investigation, it's really up to them. Yes, it will be confidential. The investigators should normally ensure that the investigation is carried out confidentially, but you must understand that in certain circumstances, it gets out. And that's why we often propose or recommend to our clients that when they order an investigation from a third party, that they also look at a communication plan so that if there is a leak in the investigation, if the information is leaked out to the press, to outside agencies, or to stakeholders in your company, you're ready to act and respond to that. You're not caught by surprise. And that's very important. Again, it's from experience. It's not in the standard. It's just things we've learned throughout our experience. Now, as a rule of thumb, and that's very important, all complaints should be taken seriously, no matter where it comes from, how it's brought to your attention, or to the attention of management or the compliance function, it's very important that all complaints be taken seriously, at least at the assessment stage, to evaluate where it comes from, what's the credibility of the source, is it hearsay or first-hand observation, does it come from a confidential line? Usually when it comes from an employee through a confidential line, you can assess the value, and it's often there is an assessment done by the owners or the managers of the confidential line. They will ask questions, they will require some information, some additional information, so you can have a better idea if the information that you're getting is solid, where it comes from. The level of details also is another aspect that will give you some credibility, give credibility to the information. And is there possible corroboration through document? Often, as from our experience at least, what we've noticed is when it came from a confidential line or for an outside party that manages that line, you will get some information, and sometimes you even get documents to support the complaint, to show what is they suspect as being a bribery in this case. So you can, sometimes you don't, but more often than not, you do have that. Again, this morning we had an interesting discussion in this group, this place here, with a lawyer regarding outside and inside in-house counsel. And his position, which I thought was very interesting because it corresponds to things that I've noticed myself, is that in many instances, inside counsel are sometimes caught between a rock and a hard place, in terms that they're there to help the company move forward, implement a standard, and at the same time make sure that the company is prosperous and so on. So they may be in a very difficult situation. In some circumstances, they may even be in conflict of interest and deciding should we go with a full-blown investigation or not. So that's where top management must look at possibly going third party with the counsel, also getting external counsel to come in and advise them on the best course of action. Again, it's not a matter of trying to sweep the situation under the rug. Far from it. It's to make sure that before we make a move, because any one of you have been in an organization where there has been an internal investigation, you know how disruptive it can be and how morale of the employees can be affected by such an investigation. So it's very important. It's not it's a decision that needs to be well thought out. And again, under ISO standards, well documented. Whatever decision you make, if you do make a decision not to go the investigative route, but to go via management review or internal audit, make sure that you document that. Why? What are the reasons? What's the information you had at such a date and such a time when that decision was made? And what are the criteria under which you made that decision? Make sure that it's well documented, because whenever the auditors come around, you will need that to demonstrate the seriousness of your management. In doubt, obviously, order an investigation. Again, you're not there to sweep this under the rug. If you're not sure, if you have any doubt, or if you have a doubt that even an internal audit or a management review is not the best course of action, then go ahead and order an investigation. Who should get the complaint? Obviously, preferably the anti-bribery compliance function. If reported to other person, the internal procedure should require immediate transmission of the alleged violation to the anti-bribery. Why? Why would we require that? It's because it's very important that there should be only one area, one place where all these complaints go. Otherwise, you may have many complaints flying around the company without your compliance function even knowing about it. Some may come to the board, some may come at the top management. Again, it's important that wherever there should be a procedure very clear in the organization that wherever that complaint comes in, it should be brought to the attention and monitored by the compliance function, so that you can, again, keep an eye on what's happening and have a log of all the issues that may have been arisen throughout the year regarding that. Procedure should also, that's the procedure, that's written procedure, should also establish who is responsible for the initial assessment. Who can assess if we're going with the investigation or not? Again, depending on the importance, who's involved, who are we talking about in the complaint. Again, this should be stated out in a procedure. It's not something that you should decide, well, let's flip the coin here and see who's available this morning. It's not the way it goes. And it should not go that way, because that's where you may get a finger pointed at you, say, oh, you really tried to cover this one up, right? Because look at that there. You didn't have your best people on that assessment team, was it? So again, it has to be clearly stated out in the procedure who is responsible for that assessment. If a major violation is reported, anti-bribery compliance function should bring the situation to top management if it's not already there. What are the benefits of a professionally conducted investigation? And I'll come back to the professionally conducted in a few minutes. First of all, it will permit you to determine and understand the facts and the potential legal impacts. The more and more. In Canada, for now anyway, I think it's going to change in the years to come, there's not too many civil liability or civil pursuit that are taken. But if you look worldwide, more and more, it's very, if you have a compliance, if you have a standard and you've been certified and you don't carry yourself out in a way that's respect your standard, you're very liable to be to have liabilities for following a non-compliance or a violation that is not properly investigated and managed. Assess the efficiency of its management system and controls. Obviously, if you're investigating violations, small violations or a major violation, you will have to look at your management system because obviously something went wrong somewhere. Someone closed their eyes. Someone noticed something and didn't warn no one about it, or no flag was raised. So there are questions to be answered there from a management point of view also. But that's going to be in the scope of the investigation to look at that also. Prevent further violation, obviously, especially if you need to do so rapidly, because if it's ongoing, probably your investigations will be pretty aggressive in the first few days. Why? Because you will want to prevent further violations and put a stop to whatever's going on. Demonstrate strong leadership. Obviously, that will have a positive impact from that sense. There may be some negative outcome, but positively, obviously, their leadership there is going to be demonstrated. Minimize disruptive impact on business and employee morale. Get over with it. Let's do this investigation and do it in a professional manner with respect, respecting the people involved, but yet let's get on with it. It's not, you know, get this going for months because the longer this investigation is going on, the more negative impact on morale and the organization itself. So you want to have that done fairly rapidly with professional people that can do that in a good manner. And promote the anti-bribery culture of the organization, well, obviously, again, with strong leadership that is demonstrated. And we know that with the ISO standard, you need to have top management, leadership, very strong, very demonstrated. But again, if you do an investigation because you have information regarding violations, it will help reinforce the anti-bribery culture in the organization. One point I'd like to stress here on this. We've had a research done by a friend of ours, which is a doctor in psychology and a profiler for one of the major police forces in Quebec, here in Canada. And we asked her to give us are the criteria or the key elements that would make someone or give the opportunity to someone to bribe or to use bribery. And it's very interesting because, in fact, it's white-collar crime, right? There's no specific research in the world, as far as we know now, that addresses only corruption. But often corruption, collusion, and other white-collar crime are pretty well mixed together, and the outcome of her research was very interesting, is that there are many factors, obviously, that are contributing. But the major factor contributing to that is the organizational culture. If in your culture, you know, it's a culture based on results at all costs, obviously you're creating a culture in which you would not be surprised to see employees taking initiative that would make, you know, violate. Another aspect also is the way you compensate your employees. If they are compensated, and let's say that over 40% of their salary is based on results, then you're going to have very strong controls, because what you're doing, your incentive is so high, that at the end of the year, if my numbers are not totally met, and I still have a month ahead of me to meet my objective of the year to get the bonus, I may be tempted to give some money to get a bigger contract, or just so that I can get my bonus, and make sure that I get it. So again, you have to look at this in a very wide perspective and a global perspective of the organization, because there are many aspects that may contribute to that, and it's to find the elements. So again, an investigation may bring some thoughts on that and some observations that you may, as managers afterwards, look into and decide what's the best course of action. Again, on the other side, failure to investigate a credible allegation will undermine the credibility. It's contrary to the other. May expose senior management to allegations of cover-up, that's for sure. You can count on media for that. You can also count on your union for that, employee unions for that. You're giving them tools, you're giving them ammunitions. So again, keep in mind that it's very important. Suspension or loss of certification. If you are certified, obviously there is a risk there, a major risk. If you're audited by outside third party, it may bring about a suspension of your certification. And keep in mind that a suspension or a loss of certification, there is publicity that is linked to that. PECB, for example, will produce media information. It's important. It's important for them. It's important for ISO. It's important for all the structure supporting the international standards. That a company that is certified and loses that certification because they're not meeting the standard, there must be some media coverage of that. So they will emit a proper media release regarding that. And criminal charges and civil liability may often even result. Planning the internal investigation, it must be conducted by personnel who are not part of the role of the function being investigated. That's pretty standard. I mean, you know, it's kind of the basic. Counsel, internal or external, for the reason I mentioned earlier, should be part of the investigating team, especially if it's outside counsel. Investigators must be properly empowered, I mentioned that, and expertise and experience in bribery investigation. This is where I get to sound my horn a bit. There's a lot of people that will say to you, well, we're good, we have investigators, we can do this, we can do that. Be careful, be very careful. In order to have a properly, because we're not investigating a theft, we're investigating corruption. So you need to have investigators, especially third-party investigators, that have training, that are good in interviews, that can do so in a very proper and professional manner, can do it relatively rapidly, and have experience either in organized crime, corruption, bribery, collusion, this type of investigation. It's not the same as investigating internal theft. It's not the same thing at all. We're not going to the same place. It's not, and you don't always have all the resources that you would have in a police force, for example, to carry out such an investigation. So again, I insist on that aspect. Make sure that you choose properly your investigators for that. The risk of the bribery investigation, because like in anything else, there are risks to carrying out an investigation. One of them is the legal implications, obviously. If it's a major corruption scheme, if we should advise outside agencies about this, again, these are elements that need to be taken into consideration. Difficulty of establishing the scope of the corruption scheme. At the beginning, it may start with a small 2 or 3 elements that were discovered during an audit or because of information that was brought to the attention of top management from different sources. But then when we start the investigation, it seems to be much more bigger, much more complex, and touch many more employees. So again, at the beginning, you have to be careful. You have to carry out the investigation in a way that you can adapt to, depending on the scope of the investigation. It's not a fishing expedition. And this is so important. You know, we're not in a fishing expedition. I don't look like a fisherman, and I'm not. So you don't want me to go into your organization and start fishing. That's not where I'm going. You need to have in your head exactly what, where, when, and please try to uncover whatever. But it's clear. And again, it goes back to the professionalism of the investigators. If they accept the fishing expedition, then you have a red flag here. They shouldn't. We should know beforehand, what are we investigating? Time, money, and unwanted negative press exposure. Obviously, time and money. This morning I was flabbergasted when the lawyer that was here said one investigation that they carried out cost $600 million. Oh. You know, that's a lot of money. Obviously, we're talking about a major world corporation, but still, you know, it's, so take it at different level. If it's a small company, a small organization, or a medium or a larger size organization, cost is going to be important. It's a cost factor is going to be important. And it may slow down your operation. It may create some problem inside. So that adds to the cost also of the investigation. Urgency to stop an ongoing violation. But one aspect that I think is very important is to clear innocent employees. Because too often we say, oh, it's the sales department. You know, yeah, sure, the sales department, or it's the buyers. Oh yeah, well, yeah, you know, they're on every scheme, which is not true. Again, focus and try to run the investigation in a professional manner so that we can clear rapidly innocent employees as soon as possible. That will help also add credibility to your process, to your investigative process. Take corrective action sooner than later. You don't have to wait till the investigation is over to take corrective action. If we do find something, because there is an ongoing information process with the compliance function or the manager that ordered the investigation, we do regular reports, regular reporting. If we have information, he should get it so that he can take corrective action sooner than later. Minimize negative impact on employee morale. I've mentioned that many times. Minimize negative impact on operation, obviously, because it's money. for the organization, so you don't want to slow down your operations. Demonstrate strong leadership, mentioned so, and reinforce credibility. I've mentioned that before. Top management responsibilities. Top management must be informed by the anti-bribery compliance function of the progress. Again, if the compliance function ordered the investigation. If the investigation was ordered by higher up, well, obviously you will be reporting to higher up on a regular basis. So your chief investigator, whoever's in charge of the investigation, which could be an external counsel or an internal counsel or your compliance function, should report on a regular basis about the progress of the investigation. Follow up, and this again, in many instances, what I've noticed from my clients is that they were they didn't want to get involved in the investigation, so they really tried to keep us an arm's length from them, which is not necessarily a good reaction from their part. In the sense of the following sense, is they're responsible for the investigation anyway at the end of the day. They are. For me to give them reports of the progress of the investigation is not to reveal details about the way the investigation is going or information I may have gotten confidentially from sources during the investigation. I'm reporting the progress of the investigation. And if they try to tell me what to do, I'll say, well, now, you hired me to do this. Let me do what I have to do. If you're not satisfied, you let me know. But in the meantime, it's my responsibility to carry out the investigation. Again, we don't have that problem. We don't have the, but many cases what I've noticed is that, top management will not even want to meet with us. Well, I don't see why, it's because they kind of confuse the fact that if we're reporting to them, it's like if they're perceived influencing the way we carry out the investigation. Well, again, if you have professional investigators involved, you don't have to be worried about that too much. Because if you try to cross that line, you will know pretty quick that you're out of your scope. You're out of your area of expertise, and we will not tolerate that. Make certain that Clause 8.9 of the standard is applied. That's for the retaliation against sources. If it's internal sources, the standard states very clearly that no retaliation may be taken against the employee that give information in good faith. So again, it's a responsibility of top management, not the investigators. The investigators, if we have some information to the fact that there was retaliation, will bring it to top management. Top management must take their responsibility regarding that. In many cases, it may be touchy. Communication plan, obviously I've mentioned earlier, but you got to be ready. At the end of the investigation, whenever we submit our report, and people know that the investigation is finished and that top management has had the report, then they will expect communication of some sort. Plan that. Have your communication spokesperson or specialist get ready for that and prepare this communication strategy, internal and external, in case there is external information. Now, the content of the investigative report, that's fairly basic again, but that's what you should expect. Nature of the alleged bribery violation, summary of the facts gathered during the investigation, the facts that we've been able to corroborate, to support with documents or otherwise. The chronology of events, because it may be a number of events that occurred over a long period of time. Again, there might be a chronology there in terms of what happened. People interviewed and document reviewed. Again, if it's not confidential or if we haven't had whistleblowers involved that will not want to have their name in the report, then we will respect that. Organization's procedure and guidelines that apply, because again, we will look at the guidelines and the procedures and the controls that you've instated in the organization regarding the investigation we're doing, and if there are aspects that need to be beefed up. Possible breakdown in internal controls, conclusions reached on key issues. And again, I make a difference here between a conclusion and a recommendation. We don't make any specific recommendation. Why? People will say, well why? I've hired you to run an investigation, to conduct an investigation, and then you will report to me, you will write the report, but you won't make any recommendation. No, it's out of my scope. I'm investigator. I'm investigating. I'll bring the facts. Just the facts, ma'am. I'll bring the facts. It's up to you. It's a management decision. What's the best course of action? And because I don't have the knowledge of the whole company, the whole organization, it's very difficult for me, and risky to a certain level, to come up with recommendations that may or may not apply at all. I will base my recommendation on the facts or the information I've identified during the investigation, but yet it may not apply at all to the overall organization for all kinds of reasons. So we have to be very careful here. Yes, we will come with conclusions, but don't expect, at least, unless you put it in our scope, and then if we do, we will write that in another report. But you won't see any recommendation in this report, okay? Again, it's a matter of carrying out a professional investigation. Under the standard, management decision can terminate, withdraw from, or modify an organization and involvement in a project or a transaction or a contract. If we're talking about an investigation that may imply outside or partner, financial partners of some sort, then you may have, the management may decide to withdraw from an agreement, from a partnership of some sort. It may happen. The company, the manager may decide to repay, reclaim any improper benefits that were obtained by the bribery. That may be an issue. Again, that shows how it would be risky in an investigation report to come up with recommendations, because there are many aspects that will not be necessarily covered by the investigation, but then the lawyers and the counsel of the organization may have other ideas where they want to go with that. Discipline responsible personnel, obviously, there's disciplinary aspects. Report the matter to the authorities. If they do have to disclose some information to outside authorities, it's up to them to do it. It's not the investigator's job. And review the anti-bribery management system policies and procedures. Because again, if there was some violations and if there was corruption, there's a good chance that probably the anti-bribery management system needs to be beefed up somehow, needs to be tweaked because obviously it occurred. Again, keep in mind that even if you're certified under the ISO, it's not a reassurance that there won't be any bribery. The standard is there to detect, to prevent, detect, and manage and treat whatever bribery. But it's nowhere near that it's going to eliminate bribery or bribery situation. It's not. Corruption will probably still be there. Thank you very much for your time. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you.